ever read a story that seems like it's got everything going for it? It's got a great premise, it's got detail and setting, the setting is beautiful, it's got good characters. I mean, it's really something that you feel like you want to read and would be just right up your alley. And you get to the end of it and you think to yourself, meh. In just about every case like that, I can almost guarantee the culprit is a lack of suspense. So, today we are going to join the Wordstock party and talk about suspense. Come on over and I will show you my two favorite ways to develop suspense in my books, as well as two prompts that I have found the most helpful. Hello and welcome back, everyone. For anyone new, my name is Emily Harris and I write steamy historical romance. First things first, many thanks to Robert over at the Story Detective for letting me come in and join the fun for Wordstock. This is a really fun and very helpful program in which Authortubers get together and share their insights on different aspects of story writing. That said, today we are talking about suspense. And to start things off, I want to clarify what suspense is, because I think it's very easy for us to mistake drama or tension for suspense. The thing we have to understand about suspense is it's not an action thing, it's an emotion thing. Suspense is what keeps your readers invested in your characters. And this is probably one of the most important things in a story, because readers will enjoy a basic story, they will enjoy a setting or a plot line. But what we really want to do is connect with the characters. We want to feel like those characters are real. And the way to do that is to get inside of their heads. Here, however, comes the tricky part. How do we let the reader know what our characters' emotions are without defaulting to a giant internal monologue of the character felt this, and then he felt that, and woe is me this, and sadness that. That is not the best way to go about instilling a sense of emotion in your characters. But then, what else do we do? I mean, how do we describe emotion if we don't want to actively say the character felt this? Think about, to begin with, what you feel like when you have different emotions. This goes along very much with the idea of show, don't tell. You want to give the reader some hints at emotion, very recognizable hints, things that they can relate to without too much of that out and out saying this is what they felt. Two ways that I like to do that. The first is a dialogue. It's easy as an author to get stuck with long passages of prose in which everything is internalized. That gets boring for the reader. So spice it up here and there with something like dialogue. This can either be short monologue items like the character talking to themselves, or short dialogues with another character. The trick with having another character that they talk to is that you don't want to delve too much into having a lot of outside action going on. Suspense is not about outside action. It's not about what's going on around the character and influencing the character. Suspense is what's going on inside. So that's the thing that really has to be taken into account. The second way that I enjoy adding suspense to something I'm writing is by creating an observation. So instead of having my character just standing there and thinking or feeling things, I go back to what would I do if I felt this way? What possible things might I experience if I felt this way? Basically, think about if you are anxious, for example. Have you ever been so anxious about something that it really made you feel ill? I have. This is something that your reader can relate to. They have probably felt this way before. So, instead of saying, my character was so anxious, anxiety overtook his or her emotions, you want to lean toward something like they were pacing through the room, or they were waiting for someone and worried about getting ill or something like that. That's a really bad example, but I am really bad at thinking stuff up on the fly. Because of that, I will give an example later. But I think you get the general gist, right? We want to know what the character is feeling without being told that. Another good way to think about it in terms of external, internal, you have the idea of sympathy and empathy. Your readers can sympathize with a plot. They can sympathize with actions going on. But you want the reader to empathize with your character. You want the reader to feel what they feel. And the only way to do that is to think about how you feel in a particular situation and come up with different ways to illustrate that. All right, now I also have two resources it's one resource, two prompts that have helped me a lot in this. The first prompt is describe the scene from your character's point of view through all of their senses. Meaning, you've got the basic scene down. Now, think of it again, but this time think, what do they smell? What do they hear? Do they touch anything? What does it feel like? You're not necessarily going to use all of the senses in the final scene, although having a couple of them is generally advisable. But by doing this, it creates something the reader can relate to, because the reader has senses. The reader knows if your character walks in and smells burnt toast, we immediately have an empathetic sense of that. Oh, I know what burnt toast smells like. And that may bring up memories for one thing or another for the reader. So this is important to establish an emotional connection with the reader. The second prompt is to list what are the visceral and somatic responses that your character has to the emotion they're feeling. So what that is, visceral relates to deep emotion, somatic is your bodily responses. So all this is really saying is to do what I had talked about earlier and connect a bodily reaction to a deep feeling. And this may encompass a variety of things. Is it some sort of deep-seated fear that your character has? What reaction do they have to that? Does your character for example, suffer from claustrophobia, as one of my characters did. What is their reaction? In my case, my character became very short of breath and very antsy, very flighty, meaning wanting to get out of whatever she felt was closing her in, hemming her in. How did I come up with this? Well, you can imagine what it would feel like to have some sort of fear like that. In my case, I lucked out. My sister is claustrophobic, so I have seen how she reacts to feeling hemmed in and was able to use a little bit of that. Last thing that I'm going to add in is an example, because as mentioned before, I'm bad at coming up with examples on the fly. So I am going to read to you the introduction paragraph of my book, To Love in Silence, as we start out by meeting our hero, the main character, Eric Langdon. And this is not a new character. We met him in books 1 and 2 as a side character. And so we know certain things about him. We know he works in intelligence, Regency era, Napoleonic Wars, intelligence in England. We know he's deaf. We know that he is, because of his career, he's a pretty self-sufficient, strong character, despite what the social norms of the time think of him. So, in our first paragraph in this book, we meet him and we get to find out, hopefully, a little bit more about his inner workings. We know already how he presents himself to his family and the world. Now we have to find out what's inside that we can relate to. Why should we care about this character? So take a listen, and please do let me know in the comments after you finish watching this whether or not this paragraph succeeded in giving you some reason to feel invested in this character. The press of steel against the soft, vulnerable flesh of his wrist tempted Eric to a morbid degree, inciting a rapid pulse and the deep, heated flush of mortification. Blinking down at the letter opener, compressing a white line into the otherwise healthy hues of his forearm, he wondered how the implement came to rest there. The hand clasped about the handle trembled, knuckles whitening. He hadn't meant to dredge up the memory, thinking himself safe in rummaging through the long-neglected correspondence on his desk. But something in the notes sent him back to all those years ago. Perhaps you ought to consider your limitations. All right, that is how we meet Eric in my book. So, you'll notice, hopefully notice, there is no external action going on. He is basically in contemplative mode. He is observing himself. You tell me, did that paragraph make the point of letting us know how Eric feels? Because this becomes crucial in why his story develops the way it does. And that is where I'm going to leave things today, because you have got to go and watch a plethora of additional suspense videos today from this Wordstock phenomenon. And additionally, I want to go watch those videos. So please do like the video if you found it useful, comment about that last bit for me, subscribe if you like the channel, and I will be back shortly with additional information for you on my books, on my characters, whatever else we come up with. Thanks very much for stopping by, and I'll see you then.